Welcome everyone. Today we're going to talk about animation layers in Maya 2020. The tutorial is aimed at beginners, so let's start. Let's make a start. I've just opened up a scene file. Let me just play this animation. You can see that it's a funny looking character walking across the scene. Nothing spectacular. I know I'm not going to win any Oscars, but that's not the point. Let me just stop that and let's go back to the start. So if I wanted to change something about this animation without the use of animation layers, I would start to play around with the animation directly. So here we can see all of my animation controllers, and I could just go in and start playing around with the animation. You can see the animation curves here, and I could just go in and start modifying them. The problem with this workflow is that it's not really non-destructive, meaning you don't have the freedom of experimenting, because as all animators know, if you start modifying animation curves and keyframes, you can really run into problems and make a mess of things, and it's very hard to recover. So what animation layers provides is really a capability to isolate your changes, to experiment with the freedom and the safety net of being able to go back to your previous layer. So it's a non-destructive workflow. So let's quickly show how animation layers are used inside Maya. So on my standard channel box, I've got my display layer. So here are my normal display layers. I've created a few as part of the scene file. And next to the display tab, I've got the animation layer tab. So let's go into this. Right, so what we can do is we can create an empty layer. So let me just go in and create one. And for some reason, I'm not seeing anything. Let me just see. Okay. You need to have all layers selected. So here we can see that Maya has created a brand new layer called Animation Layer 1. And below it, we've got a base animation layer. This is automatically created by Maya, and this is where all your animation curves and keyframes are stored. So this is your base layer, effectively. This layer is empty, and you can start to work on specific aspects of your animation in the safety of knowing that if something goes wrong, you can always refer back to your base animation layer. So that's the real advantage. So everything inside the base layer is locked, and you can unlock it or lock it using this lock symbol. So here I'm going to lock this because I'm happy with my base animation. I just want to change something specific to this character. So let's try this out. So if I select Animation Layer 1, I'm going to rename this to Bounce. And before I can actually start working on this animation layer, I just need to tell Maya which controllers I'm interested in. So which parts of the animation do I want to isolate and work on? So what we can do is, in this particular example, I'm going to use the core controller, and I've got my layer already selected. I can go to my layers menu and add selected objects. So now in the graph editor, you can see that the bounce layer has been added, and I've got the core control. So that means I can work with this animation layer now, but I can only change or affect this particular channel or controllers within this channel. So it's really providing a non-destructive, safe workflow. So I can experiment and tinker. If I'm not happy, I can always delete the layer and go back. Okay, so let's try this out. Let's go to my translate Y attribute, and I'm going to keyframe on frame 1. and I'm going to move 6 frames forward, and I'm going to bring this character down and keyframe that, and move along another 6 characters to frame 12, and I'm going to bring this character back up and keyframe that. So now I've got my animation curves created for the bounce motion. What I can do is just select these keyframes because I want to repeat this, of course, because I want the bounce to cycle through the animation. I can easily do this with the post infinity option. So let me go to curves and post infinity cycle. Okay, so let's have a look at what that looks like. Let me play it now. Now you can see that the character's got this nice little bounce going on. And the great thing about layers is you can switch the layer off to compare and contrast. So I can go to this mute layer button. If I check that, go back to the start, only the base animation is now being used. So you've got the original animation. You can see the character. It doesn't really have the bounce. And if I switch it back on, we have the bounce. So really that's how simple and intuitive it is, really. I think it's quite straightforward. The other useful feature with animation layers is I can, let's imagine that the bounce is a bit too pronounced. I can dial down the keyframes in this particular channel with this weight attribute. So here you've got this weight attribute box. So let's reduce it by 50%. At the moment it's set to 1. Let's bring that down to 0.5 and see what it looks like. So now you can see that the character still got the bounce, but it's less pronounced. I actually like the full bounce, so I'm going to turn that back up to 1. There you go. So that's how you use animation layers. It's a great way of really structuring your animation, giving animators the freedom to really experiment without worrying about ruining their animation. So once I'm happy with bounce, for example, I can lock this layer, and now you can see that the animation curves on Translate Y are grayed out. I can't change anything about this. It's completely safe. And I can go in and create additional layers. And I could, for argument's sake, I could work on another aspect of the animation. So really it aids the whole animation workflow. Not only does it make it non-destructive, but I actually think it makes you think about your animation. So you can really have a structure to it. And there's no limit to the number of animation layers you can have. So really, like all things in Maya, it's worth mentioning that I've only touched the surface of animation layers. As you can see, there are many things, many options in the animation layers menu item, but I think it's enough to get started with. So that's it. I hope you found it useful. Thanks for listening.